Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and I have some bad news, Scott.
Oh no, what is it?
Chris is lab rat.
We knew that already. We talked about it for like 2 hours, like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, I forgot. Did you, are you okay?
I mean, yeah. It was like literally last year.
Well, good. This went well, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, this is the podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of mutating dogs that are different from the other mutating dogs, hairy-armed assassins, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, we begin Arc 11, Blinding. We'll be covering the first 3 chapters of Blinding this week, 11.1, 11.2, and 11.3. We had originally planned on covering a 4th chapter, Matt, 11.a, the side piece interlude, but we saw how long our script was getting, and we decided that that's probably not a good idea. So we're going to limit it to 3 chapters this week, cover an additional 3 next week, and then be fully caught up and back to normal.
Yeah, I think ultimately everyone will be happy that we did it this way because it gives us the space to talk about these 3 chapters at a leisurely pace, not try to cram 4 into one episode.
Yeah. Cramming 4 chapters into one episode. What kind of crazy person would do that?
Yeah, it's not possible.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah. Anyway, so this week, Victoria and company deal with some mutated dogs and people as they find it increasingly more difficult to stop villains from doing villainy things. Then Victoria breaks the lab rat news to her team, which goes over about as well as you could expect. And finally, Chicken Little and Kenzie friendship finally succeeds in making Tattletale and Victoria work together after, you know, their house almost gets burned down. Matt, what did you think of these 3 chapters?
These are great. These are all great in different ways. Just kind of a mixture of like, we had a very like delightful chapter. We had a very intense emotional chapter that had been built up to for a long time where we really got to explore our characters. I once again, I'm glad that we get to kind of like dive into all 3 of these in detail, because all 3 of them, I couldn't keep myself actually from like talking at some depth about each of them. You know,
yeah,
there wasn't one of these. There wasn't like I was trying to have some brevity in my summaries this week. So I was like, we got a lot to go through. I'll try to be brief. It was like, no, it didn't work. There was too much that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I think, that's I think why we ended up making the decision to limit it at 3 this week, because you're absolutely right that when I was going through and reading these 4 chapters over the break, I was like, in my head, I was like, okay, we got to focus a lot of time on the 2nd chapter for obvious reasons. We got to focus a lot of time on the interlude because it's an interlude. And I felt like what was going to happen in my mind was that the 1st chapter and the 3rd chapter were going to get like the sped up version. And then as we were going through and reading them again and kind of seeing the themes of the chapter and the early themes of the arc coalesce, I realized, no, there's a lot of important stuff in this that needs to be covered. And that's kind of where we ended up where we are right now.
Yep. All right. So let's do some quick announcements. Congratulations to the winners of the 5th quarterly fan art contest, J Maniac and FIP Industries. So it was a tie.
Well, no, it wasn't a tie.
It wasn't a tie. Oh,
no,
sorry.
No, it was tied up until like the very end.
It was almost a tie.
J Maniac won and FIP Industries came in a very, very close second.
Okay, well that's awesome. So yeah, you can check out the winning artwork and all the other entries by heading over to doofmedia.com. Some really great stuff as usual.
Yeah.
And there'll be a link in the show notes for this episode leading to those artworks.
Yeah. As always, thrilled with all of your artwork. We have so much fun doing this, and the entries were really close. I think this was the closest vote we've had so far. We usually have like, there's a clear favorite, and everyone else gets some votes, but one like dominates. That wasn't the case this time. It was very close down the stretch. And I think that's a testament to the amount of like skill that was done in all this work. It's really great. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. We also got a lot of really great feedback from our requests for feedback last episode, and we're probably going to be acting on a lot of it, actually. So,
yeah, we really appreciate
yeah.
you guys taking the time. I mean, we got emails, we got responses in the Reddit, we got responses in our Discord, we got some very constructive feedback. You know, there was some people letting us know the parts that they specifically liked, and some people letting us know the parts that they didn't like and what they wanted us to focus on more. And I don't think, Matt, we're going to do like a complete retooling of the show based on everyone's feedback, but there are changes we want to make based on some of the stuff.
Yeah. I think that leads nicely into the fact that we're going to be skipping over the community spotlight part of the show where we reference the Reddit thread this week. Part of that is because this script was already like longer than it should be before we even got around to collating the questions. The other part is just that a lot of our feedback was directed at like the way we handle the discussion questions, the length of it, the placement of it within the show, and I feel like we need to get our heads around that a little bit better before we move on. So gonna skip that today.
Yeah, I definitely think that is, out of everything we got, that was the least enjoyed portion of the show. So we'll have to. We've got things percolating in the background. We're trying to come up with something different to do, different ways to do this. So yeah, well, it'll be back in some form, but we've got plenty to talk about this week.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. So let's get right on into it with chapter 11.1, the opening of Arc 11. And we're plunged in media res into a big clusterfuck of a brawl. Breakthrough is defending a local patrol block jail against the onslaught of a hulked out berserk group of people and dogs. As Victoria beats up a giant monster dog, she barks orders at the patrol normies, telling them to move all their prisoners into one cell so they can sequester themselves in the other one.
Did you say barks orders on purpose? Was that you trying to be clever?
I don't even know, but I'm going to say yes.
All right. So let's talk about in media res a bit, because I'm a big fan of this concept in general, right? Like I don't know if I've ever specifically stated this on this show, but I like in media res as a writing technique. I think when it's done really well, it basically guarantees that I'm going to be hooked into what's going on, because first of all, you start right in the middle of the action, and then there's just enough like mystery and discovery going on that you're kind of trying to solve what is happening. Where are we? When are we? And so I really like it as a technique when used well. And I think here at the start of this arc is a good example of where it is used well. And I think that's because part of the reason is because I think it's playing off our expectations a little bit. When we last left Victoria, she had just found out the truth of Chris. And then we have the Chris interlude where we get filled in on that truth. And then suddenly we're in a fight against monsters. We're fighting against people and dogs that have been transformed into monsters. And there's this beat, I think you say to yourself as you're reading this, are they fighting Chris? It's like, did we jump forward to some moment where like, and that quickly gets like cleared up, and no, it's not. But I think there's a beat there where you kind of think that, and I think the writing knows that you're probably going to jump to that conclusion at least right off before it moves into kind of explaining what's going on, and I think that makes this work very well.
Yeah, I think at the very least, the idea that the people they're fighting are using formulas to create mutations of people against their will is very, like, at least supposed to remind you of Chris.
Yeah. And I mean, and the text really plays off the horror of it, right? Because we when these people are described to us, the text says their eyes were bloodshot and their throats produced noises that were like they were trying to scream while being strangled. Like, this is very, like, visceral type of shocking horror, and coming off of what we just learned about Chris, this makes you uncomfortable, and which I think is probably what Victoria is going through. She has just been researching this stuff we learn later. She knows the truth of Chris. She knows what he can do and what he has done, and now she's fighting people that have done the same thing, and that's like putting her. A lot of this chapter, she feels kind of off kilter a little bit, and we learn later that part of that is because she's working up to having to reveal this information to her team, but she's kind of like off her game a little bit throughout a lot of this.
Yeah. The other thing I'll mention about the in media res is just like, this is a perfect example of it, because like you're just a little bit confused, but in a way that makes you interested. It's it's not too confused, but also you're not exactly picking up right where you left off.
Yeah,
So,
and that's a tightrope to walk, right? Like, because there have been times when I felt that the story has like fallen too far on one side where I'm just confused. But I think in here it skirts that line, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And you're putting together this fairly complicated physical environment of like what's actually happening here, and I think it all comes together really well.
Yeah, I agree.
So Victoria uses the wretch to wrestle the dog down the hall and toward the cells, reflecting on the fact that she hasn't really been in a situation where she could use the wretch all out in close quarters like she is right now before.
Yeah, and it's this moment of reflection as she has the wretch like inside the mouth of, like, her arm is inside the mouth of the dog, but obviously the mouth of the dog, the jaws are not clamped around her arm because they're clamped around the wretch. And you called this a brawl before, and I think you're absolutely right. That's what this is. Like, she's got her legs around its neck and like riding it, almost like forcing it into the cell, and it's very, very tactile. I think the really interesting thing to me about this is that she's not freaked out by the wretch at all. She isn't concerned that the squatties are going to see it, that they're going to like see the weirdness of the dog's mouth not being completely enclosed around it and know that something's up with her. That she doesn't seem concerned about any of that. It's more just like, I don't have a lot of experience in this because I've not gotten to use it a lot. It's very just kind of reserved, like just I'm trying to think of the word. She just like, it's all strategy based. It's not like she doesn't get introspective and go down her hole about it, right?
Yeah, she's not like happy about it. She's not like, oh, this is cool, I finally get to use the wretch all out against an opponent, which, a person who doesn't have her traumatic background with that power might feel. Yeah. But neither is she like flinching away from it in this moment.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So the squatties hesitate before bringing Etna and Cressid out of one of the cells to make room for the dog. And therefore we learn that those two capes are here. Tristan joins her in pushing, and Sveta thwips by to help with pulling the dog into the cell using her new hermit crab arm.
Yeah, this is a cool teen moment. I think it's one of those moments where, because we started in media res, we have a question in the back of our head that, where's the rest of the team? And then suddenly they arrive in a heroic type fashion to help her finish this particular part of the fight. I love Sveta's arm. And we're going to talk about this more in the next chapter as we kind of get into some of what's going on with Sveta. But I really like that the text like makes it clear that it gives her additional power, but it makes her off balance. She's not as balanced. And I think that's like, that off balance nature of her is very fitting with what's probably going on with her right now. Like, we know that she's gone through this difficult thing and she's kind of being very guarded about it. But I think the physical description of her off balance tracking to how she's doing mentally right now seems like it would be very fitting. So I just like that image of her kind of maybe a little bit stronger, but not as coordinated.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's like growing pains, kind of growing unevenly, maybe.
Yeah.
I like that. So we see that Tristan is bleeding after his exertions, and basically we get the impression he's opened up his recent gunshot wound, and he immediately switches out with Byron.
Yeah, he like reaches inside his metal, like his costume, and pulls out like a shit ton of blood, and he's like, "Oh, drag," and then switches out. Yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about this a lot, but one of the things I did appreciate, and Moorman do appreciate in this story as well, is that injuries don't heal right away, right? Like our characters' injuries are still with them, and we've seen this with Victoria's gunshot wound in this story, which it's been 5 arcs since she got shot, and it still pains her. Everyone, like, it's still not fully healed. It's still part of her recovery process is healing from that gunshot wound, and I like that both physical and mental damage to a person doesn't just go away when they move on to the next bit of conflict. I wonder if this, going back to that whole physical representing the mental state thing, I wonder if this reopening of an old wound thing is like kind of a hint that something might be going on with Tristan, like the getting shot and having to be switched out to like might have re-triggered some backsliding in his progress. And this might be like laying tracks for that to come up later, or getting us in the mindset, or we could see that happening. I know that might be reaching a little bit, but I like that thought, because I think it's pretty traumatic when like you get shot and you have to be put in stasis or you're going to die. Like that's probably a pretty traumatic. I wonder if he feels the pain from the gunshot wound. Probably not, because he's feeling I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, there's a lot to think about there. I agree with at least that bit of it. Like, the fact that he seems so willing to be to go back into stasis suggests to me that he's not like freaked out about the idea of it. And there's a moment later in this episode we're going to talk about, actually, where he uses the stasis, the switching out, as almost like a way of retreating from the moment. And it's almost like Tristan is now viewing the opportunity to switch out with Byron as like a way to retreat, both physically and mentally, which, before he always wanted to be basically in the spotlight. Like he always wanted to be the one who was out, and was basically always resenting it when he couldn't be. And both brothers kind of had this attitude, I think. And now, I mean, maybe this is stretching in a completely different and perhaps opposite direction, but it almost seems like he's viewing the stasis as having benefits.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder if that brings with it a whole new host of problems where, instead of being resentful for his brother, like always wanting to be in the spotlight, he's being resentful that his brother is pushing him into all the bad situations that he doesn't want to take care of. Like, we're going to get into this when we talk about Chris in a bit, but like Tristan gets mad and is just like, fuck this, I'm out. And okay, now Byron, you have to deal with this. Like suddenly you're thrust into it, and you don't have any control over that. He made that decision for you. And I wonder if there's a whole different kind of resentment that could be tied to that these brothers haven't dealt with before. And what exploring that could mean about their ongoing relationship. I like that line of thinking a lot, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of recovery means like once you overcome some particular issue, usually that allows you to see the next issue in the line. And like gradually, I think things do get better, but there can definitely be a sense of like, oh, I didn't see this coming, Yeah. That's really cool. So
now that the action scene is over, we have to do the job of filling in the reader on what's going on, right? Because like that's the thing when you start in media res, you start in the middle of an action scene, and as that action kind of crests and you finish that scene, you need to move on to what's going on? Where are we? When are we? What's happened since we last saw our characters? And the thing that I like about this chapter is it does this very like quickly. Like we have this one line here where they say, "They came after a team of heroes with the same setup and plan yesterday," I answered. I turned around looking at Etna and Crested, who were being given a wider berth by their new cellmates. Past 3 days, things have been going a bit downhill. And I think that is like really, really efficiently laying out the facts since we last left our characters. It's been 3 days. Someone's tried this before, so this is the second time they dealt with this. Things are getting worse. That's efficient. It's done. They came to this knowing the basics. Things are said, and the basics are bad. We also get told. So like it's just like really efficient filling in the blanks after you started in media res, which I think helps this work even better.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a fantastic back and forth here that references Victoria's choice to damage the power cable at the Lime Center, which we talked about last episode, where she references this idea that she was like, if you're going to damage something, make sure that it's not people's personal property, like their car. But then like immediately in this conversation demonstrates that she's not too sure about her reasoning anymore. Like it's not obvious anymore what kind of property damage, if any, is going to be okay, especially with anti-cape sentiment running this high.
Yeah, this is our first kind of hint of doubt within Victoria that kind of I think fills this chapter, and I think it's all subtextual doubt. This is really a moment of it being on the surface, though. We kind of joked when we talked about the whole Lime Center thing about how you're so concerned about people being upset, but you're just going to take power from an entire building and think that they'll be fine with that. Like we made that joke at the time, and we see here Rain kind of has a similar mindset. Like, I think you're downplaying how much people would value power to a building like this. And she's like, yeah, you're right. And she's unsure of herself. And I think the point here is that there's no easy answers on the right way of dealing with things anymore. Whether it's, using the wretch tightly in an enclosed space, what it is and isn't okay to destroy when fighting super monster transformed humans, and or what we see at the end of this chapter, when to cut a deal with the bad guys, when to kind of come to an agreement with them out of necessity. Like, things are getting murkier, and we know Victoria as a character who enjoys the easy right and wrongs, who likes when there are bad guys out there and I can punch them to defeat them, and then things are better. She enjoys that black and white nature of some of this, and it's increasingly going away. And I think that's part of her being off focus and off centered here, and she's got doubt. She's frustrated. We see like a frustrated, angry Victoria through a lot of this. It's things are not getting easier. They're getting harder.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of beats of uncertainty and being forced to make hard decisions in these chapters. Yeah. And none of it is, I think it's definitely a trend that we're seeing actually in this arc even. And, I don't know, maybe toward the end of the last arc, but, I can't think of any examples right now.
Yeah.
I think that we're starting out this arc with this real feeling of, I think, like you just said, none of the choices she has to make in this chapter are easy or like automatic ones, Yeah,
and I mean, like I said, a lot of this is reflecting on, the big elephant in the room that is the Chris situation that she knows she's going to have to deal with eventually. But that's not all it is. Some of it is very much just her wrestling with how does one be successful in a world that's gotten this complicated now?
Yeah, right. So in the background to all this that's going on, Victoria is ginning up a dialogue with the patrol block leader, who is also hiding in the cells, trying to get a sense of how he's doing, how the kids are doing. Eventually, we learned that this guy, Harris, I believe his name is like a former desk jockey. He's not really a guy who has had contact with on the ground law enforcement. But Victoria still offers to follow his orders if he has any. Yeah,
I really love this interaction because internally, Victoria is kind of like painting this guy as completely unqualified, right? She's like, he's a desk jockey. Like she takes pains to point out the huge difference between the administrative people and the people that are like on the ground making the decisions. She shows like how even when he was a desk jockey, he was in a tiny office, so he doesn't have experience with large groups of people. She like really takes efforts internally to make this guy seem completely unqualified, and then says, if you want to take control, I will follow you. Not only does she say that, she says, I'm really hoping you want to. I'm really hoping you want to take the lead here. And I think part of this is her desire to cooperate with these guys, to make the patrol block feel involved and to spread that cooperation amongst different teams, especially amongst the non-powered people that she's trying to win over to her side. But I mean, part of this to me, I think, maps to her general feeling of uncertainty here and like that. I don't know what the right thing to do is. I'm not sure how to properly handle the situation. And maybe in just this moment, it would be so much easier if someone else could be here to make these decisions because I'm having trouble with them. And she doesn't get that, unfortunately. He's completely unwilling to step up. So she's kind of forced to make all the calls here. And I think that's so telling about what she's going through.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you said that, because I entirely parsed it as the first thing you said, which is like she's doing her thing where she's trying to reach out. She's trying to bridge the gap between human and parahuman and make these law enforcement people feel like capes are on their side. She's definitely doing that, but I think there's definitely that element of like, oh, this situation is fucked. I don't want to be responsible for this right now, like, because this has been, the we're kind of told this has been going on for a while, like,
yeah,
and really she's been in kind of a world of chaos for like weeks now, basically. So
Yeah, and part of it, she's mad too. We'll get to that in a bit, but she's frustrated by like the fact that things are not going better. Like they should be going better at this point. Like we stood up our organization. This is going to be in control. Things are going to get better, and they're just not, and that's frustrating. So she wants other people to step up. She wants other people to step up and do their part as well, and she's just not getting that. And so that only adds to the frustration. It adds to the uncertainty. It adds to this off balance feeling.
Yeah, I agree. So
there's one more amazing moment that we need to highlight before the fighting starts properly, right? When we're talking about the Tinker transformation drugs and how fast the people here changed, and if there's more people that have eaten the food that might not change here, Victoria lets out that she's been reading up on Tinker transformations. And Sveta like immediately calls her out on this. She's like, why have you been doing that? And I love this little moment because what it does for us is confirm definitely that Victoria has not told the group, because we have yet to be that hasn't been explicitly told, right? Like we go into this situation in media res, and we're not 100% sure like what has gone down in the past few days. So we need a moment where the text specifically tells us, no, she has not told them about Chris yet. And that's what this moment serves. And I like how it's done in a very like natural way. Like it ties into what's going on in the scene. And there's not just a moment of like internal narrative where Victoria says, and I haven't told them about Chris yet. Like I like it comes naturally to us, which I think makes sense for her mindset, because she's like actively avoiding thinking about the fact that she has to break this news to them. Like this whole mission they're on right now, being involved in this, as we'll learn by the end of this chapter, is supposed to be a distraction from dealing with the fact that she has to tell them. So it wouldn't be very fitting if her internal narrative is like, oh yeah, I haven't told them about Chris yet. Like it's much more fitting that comes up through dialogue, or the explanation to us, the reader, that she hasn't told them comes up through dialogue rather than it comes up through her point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fascinating character attribute of hers, I guess, because Victoria can be very decisive. Like in most situations where there's like physical, like a physical violence or even interpersonal situations, often she can be very, get to the point, straightforward, kind of like prioritize the situation, make the right decision, move on. But we've seen, like, the whole basis of the story is that there are things, psychological things, where if it's difficult for her, she will find all manner of ways to not deal with it and push it off or not think about it, flinch away from it, basically. And this Chris thing is painful enough to her that she's dealing with it the same ways that she's dealt with a lot of her own more, long-standing issues, which is, I don't want to deal with that right now. And she's put it off for 3 days, which is really kind of a long time, considering like her team should know this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I love the fact, like, Wildbow didn't have to say she waited 3 days to tell them, right? He could have just, this could be tomorrow, right? But no, we say it takes Victoria 3 days to steel herself to tell them.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I think what it also does is allow us to emotionally understand the importance of this revelation. One of the things that, like, going into this, I don't think I fully appreciated how bad this was going to go, and how bad, like, I knew Kenzie was going to take it bad, right? Like that was always in my head, because that's very well established. But like the rest of the group, like Chris has been this really nebulous character throughout the story so far for very specific reasons. And I don't think I had fully understood like how much the rest of the team was going to be hurt by this. So by building it up in the way that the text does, I think it clues you in on just how bad this is going to go for everyone. It gets you kind of emotionally prepared for how bad this is going to go. And I think without that kind of build up, without, Victoria's understandably like hesitant nature about dealing with this, we really get to understand emotionally what this is going to do to the team before we actually see it. We're prepared for it.
Yeah.
And I think all this goes into making the next chapter, fantastic. Like we're doing setup work here, not just at the beginning of the next chapter.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not a hard and fast rule in parahumans that arcs begin with interpersonal team stuff and then build up toward combat, but that is the trend. So when the trend is violated and the chapter the arc starts with cape action, what's happening here that's interesting and I think a little bit funny actually is like she's doing the cape action because the interpersonal stuff is scarier for her.
Yeah, I like that. That is a flip of the trend. Yeah.
So after setting up a lot of obstacles for the mutants pounding on the door, the team lets them in and then wears them down with holes in the ground, with cold water, and with punches.
Yeah, it's a really cool fight. Not too much to say about it, except it's really kind of great seeing how everyone on the team, like, once again, I love seeing people work together and being good at their jobs. So it's like it's fun to me seeing all these characters like combined their powers in interesting ways and in order to be able to take down these mutants. I really like how Wildbow focuses on the environment in the fight. Like, we get very explicit descriptions of how cold it is, and the moisture that's left by the water is like making everything more cold. Like, I think they use the phrase ambient moisture that's on her costume. It's just like, it really gives you the feel of not just like a geographical look of what the battlefield is, but like the feel of it. And I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
There's also a moment near the beginning of this that I just wanted to specifically point out because I think it ties into some of the stuff we've been talking about before. Rain shouts, "They're bleeding a lot. I think the effect is softening." And she says, "A damn good thing he spotted that. If I'd hit them when they weren't bulletproof tough, it could have been a disaster. Fucking irresponsible to do it like this. But I didn't feel like anyone was being responsible right now." And that's just so reflective of her frustration. Like, they're being forced to choose between shitty options because they're backed into corners and forced into these terrible choices. And it's annoying her. It's frustrating her. This isn't what she wants. She wants it to be clear, right and wrong, good, bad. And they're forced into bad or slightly less bad, which, I mean, we know through the entire first book is a lot of the choices that you're given in this world. But that's not a place where she's as comfortable operating as some of our previous protagonists were. And it's really frustrating her.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she feels like she's being irresponsible, but like in her worldview, she still has to be here. She still has to be doing this.
Right.
And it's painful for her.
Yeah.
So Rain uses his power, and it actually makes Victoria extremely annoyed to have her mind influenced by an ambient emotions power, which is super reasonable and self-aware of her.
I love it so much.
Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, let's give her credit. She didn't actually like shout and get visibly angry at him. This was all inside her head, and she kind of stops herself from reacting to it. But yeah, it is funny. There's no kind of self-reflective, I wonder if this is how people feel when I use my power around them. We just see her kind of get really pissed off. And I love that at the end of the third chapter that we're going to be talking about tonight, she kind of does this to her teammates, and we see this wonderful moment where Damsel, like, through gritted teeth says, like, "It's fine." So, like, we know like her power makes all her teammates very, very uncomfortable. She gets some of that medicine there, Victoria.
Yeah, and she uses it all the time too.
Yeah.
So,
but I wonder, like, if it's we know that the effect is slightly muted for her because that's what having emotional powers does, is it kind of makes you slightly resistant to others. I wonder how bad that is for everyone else in the team, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, I do. We keep getting these minor reminders of, Rain's using this power. It's interacting with her power, maybe.
Yeah.
And we don't really understand why. So I think it's interesting the chapter's reminding us that is a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's we had kind of forgotten about it, and maybe Rain had kind of forgotten about it. And the text here says, like, he's starting to kind of learn how to use it. Like, he's been spending time to learn how to employ it better and when to employ it better. So yeah, this is going to be increasingly more important in our breakthrough combat going forward.
Yeah, right. So the mutants are then beat back, and then they make way for the supervillains. Bitterpill, Birdbrain, Bluestocking, and Foggy Idea show up. Victoria assesses that these four would be a tough fight at the best of times, and the team generally agrees that it's not worth it. So instead, the two sides negotiate.
What I love about this, Matt, is that in the middle of this negotiation, they're talking about, I think it's Bird Brain's power, right? And the bad guys are listening in, and they know they're listening in. And so Victoria gets into kind of like an argument about certain phrases, like Blue Stocking says all or nothing isn't right, you're using the wrong words. And then she like goes into her nerd splain of, no, actually I was using it right because this is the PRT term. And it's just like so hilariously Victoria. It was like, no, you don't understand. I was using it right. Here's the PRT term. I have to define this for you so we fully, like, she's such a cape nerd. And I love when we see that poke through where she finds herself being kind of dragged into this argument of definitions with the villains she's about to try to negotiate a truce with. It's just, I just love it. I love it so much.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she almost is, she's kind of channeling like a cop here.
Yeah.
Where she's like using nomenclature. It's almost like the particular individual kind of way of speaking.
Yeah.
And it's, I agree. I love it.
Nobody challenges Victoria on PRT terminology, Matt. Nobody.
Yeah.
She knows it.
Yep.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing about this whole thing is our heroes are 100% in crisis management mode. These guys are tough. And so they suddenly find themselves having to make real choices regarding what battles are worth having and what battles aren't. There's like, I think there's a reflection here of this type of choices the PRT had to make, you know, back before Gold Morning, that we basically said we don't have the energy and the strength to stop all crime. We have to focus on certain crimes and we have to let the other stuff go. And that's kind of a place that Victoria is finding herself in now. And again, to compare it back to Worm, that's something that like another protagonist couldn't deal with at all. Like there's like the idea that we have to let some crime go because we can't handle it all was antithetical to Taylor's whole thing. She's like, no, you just stop all of it. Like, look, I'll do it. I'll stop it all. Here I go. I'm going to do it. I'm going to stop it all. And now our protagonist of this story finds herself in a situation where she feels like she has to do that. Like they say, if we fight here, we might not have energy for something else later today. And that's just a truth of, it's just reality, right? Like it's sad, but it's just the way things are.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's interesting to imagine how like, you know, earlier in this story, Victoria would really not have been okay with this at all. Like this idea of okay, we're gonna negotiate. We're not even gonna try to take them in. We're just going to negotiate, and they're gonna act. We're gonna let them get some of their people out, and in exchange, we're gonna get something that makes us feel okay about it. But like I think Victoria, like 2 weeks ago in story time, would have viewed this as like a terrible loss.
Yeah, which is not to say it's not frustrating the shit out of her, right? Like she feels like she has to do this, but she's not happy about it. Like even in the middle of this negotiation, she says to herself, what would happen if I decked her and knocked her out right now? If I took a hostage and played as ugly and as dirty as they were playing right now? She says to herself, and so she is like, she's not happily making these compromises, and this is not the first compromise she's made. We've seen this again and again where she's like forced in the corner where they have to compromise a little bit, and yeah, it is really frustrating her, and we keep seeing this frustration kind of build.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's this little moment here where Victoria compares Blue Stocking to the woman who gave her the stink eye in rehab, and I wasn't sure if that's the text or Victoria saying that she thinks that woman was Blue Stocking, or is it more like recognizing a common thread between those personalities?
Yeah, my reading, and I went back and read this after I saw your question here, was she says that's another mystery solved, right? Like she said this, I think she thinks this woman, she's decided now, she recognized this woman from somewhere, she couldn't place it, and then she's like, oh yeah, there was a woman who gave me that same look back at rehab. This must be her. I've solved that mystery now. And she kind of gives herself credit for solving a mystery because she's so frustrated by the losses she suffered and the difficult choices that she's making that she wants to give herself one little tiny victory. So yeah, that was my read on it, that she has decided that this is that person. And I don't know if that's the book saying, 100% mystery solved, this is the person, or if this is just supposed to reflect her desperate need for a win, that she's going to make this connection and then say it's official. I don't know, because like this is a little bit like if this is really just like the end of that whole thing, like there was the setup and the end is just, oh, it's that person, and that's just the end. That feels a little weird to me, right? Like it doesn't feel like a great payoff for something that was set up. Like, so I'm not sure. This is again a weird part of critiquing a book that's not done yet. Is like this could come back in some kind of fascinating way, chapters from now. But right now it just feels like, oh, that was it. Okay, huh? Okay.
Yeah, right. It still feels like unfinished. Like,
yeah.
Like I think back when the woman gave her the stink eye, I was like, something's gonna come of this, and this seems like an extension of that moment, but it's not like conclusive, right? So
yeah.
It's
not like,
we'll
oh, that was just a random villain that I'm gonna have to deal with later. The end. Yeah.
Let us know what you thought about this, listeners, because
yeah,
I want to know. So the two teams start to negotiate, but before they get too far, Harris takes Crested out of the cell and then shoves some of the mutagenic food into Crested's mouth, which is just hilarious. So with this ticking clock element introduced now, the villains agree to a one-day break from villainous activity, $20,000 in reparations to the cops, and fixing the injured Hulk people.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note here that this wasn't Harris just acting on his own. This was Victoria heavily hinted, do this, right? She said, that stuff that's on the captain's desk, get them set up with that and bring them out. She was ordering him to feed them the stuff. And so it's a little bit getting down in the mud a little bit, right, Matt? Like it's I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and be like, this was the capital W, capital T wrong thing to do here, right? I don't think so. But it is her kind of a frustrated, unsure, doubtful Victoria, mixing it in the dirt a little bit, playing some kind of dirty tactics to get an advantage in this negotiation a bit here.
Yeah, we get a few beats throughout these 3 chapters, I think, of her being like, part of me wants to play dirty if they're going to play dirty,
right?
And this is, I think this is her playing a little bit dirty.
Yeah.
What my old Taekwondo coach would have called leveling the playing field. If they're cheating, then it's not cheating if you cheat back.
Right. And she thinks to herself earlier in this argument, that's what I said, what would happen if I just decked one and took one hostage to level the negotiation? And she doesn't do that here. She's not taking someone hostage, right? But she is turning a person into a monster against their will to get what she wants. And it's not again, these people did bad things and she's trying to punish them in a way that helps out people. That's good. But yeah, she's mixed it in the mud a little bit. Yeah.
No, I didn't draw that connection that she's basically doing the Chris thing to someone for her own ends.
Yeah.
No, that's good stuff. Good stuff.
I mean, that's followed up by the end of this chapter, her talking to Harris, the patrol leader, and being like, look, you need to get some of these kids out here. We got to get some child soldiers to come out and start walking the streets because we need more people out here. And again, it's necessary. Things are getting bad. They need more boots on the ground. That is all true, but it just seems to me like we're making a lot of the same choices we made last time things started to get bad, right? We're like, all right, we got to start letting crime go. We got to start compromising in places. We got to start getting down in the dirt a little bit. And also those kids, we need more kids. Let's get some kids into this.
Yeah. I mean, she's projecting this great, I'm going to say it again, cop energy this whole chapter.
Yeah.
Like maybe even drill sergeant energy, just frustrated, aggressive, not willing to really compromise too much. I mean, she does compromise, but I guess I'm not saying she's not willing to compromise. She's willing to do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
So yeah. So Vicky and Sveta rest, and Victoria admits that she views the events of this chapter as her way of procrastinating so she doesn't have to deal with the hard task ahead of her.
Yeah, which again really level sets the amount of dread and the amount of emotional horribleness that's going to come in this next chapter, because we just had this frustrated, doubtful Victoria throughout this entire chapter, not mad, frustrated, unsure of what the right thing to do was, forced to compromise with people she didn't like, willing to play a little dirty to make sure that she gets a win on those same people while still compromising. And that was all just supposed to be a distraction to the real problem coming. And that's the next chapter. That's us dealing with the whole Chris situation.
Yep. All right, let's move right on into this chapter, which, man, again, I can't really overemphasize, like, I guess this is something that Wildbow just consistently does, is he sets up situations like this, and then he absolutely makes sure to make you feel everything that could possibly be felt as a consequence.
Yeah.
You know, like think like some writer in an alternate dimension might, you know, skip this, right? Just be like, next chapter. I told them about Chris. Everyone was feeling down about it.
Yeah.
Moving on, you know, and like, think of what, like you would never know what you were missing because this is so amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Does everybody feel me on this?
I do. And I think we're going to break it down a little bit more specifically as we get to it, but maybe not like totally skip it, but maybe homogenize the reaction, right? Yeah. Maybe like make the reaction just like this blanket feeling of anger and disappointment that comes from Breakthrough. Like that would be something I could see a writer doing. Like this is a complex issue with a lot of different characters, and it's easier to just say everyone was mad. Everyone is mad and disappointed. But what this chapter does is lets us see each individual member of this team's reaction to this news, and their issue and their disappointment and their anger is all specifically related to something that has to do with their relationship with Chris and with, you know, their general issue specifically. So it's not just homogenous anger. It's specific character-driven anger, specific character-driven betrayal, specific character-driven disappointment. And you didn't have to do it that way, but you're absolutely right. It makes this land in a much more effective and enjoyable way.
Yeah. Yeah. As you said, let's kind of walk through it because the details are where it's at.
Yeah.
So this chapter is, again, a fantastic exercise in precise atmosphere and tone setting and conveying the complex emotions of many characters at once. This is the kind of thing that Wildbow does very well. So we like just the introduction here, or as we're moving into the chapter, the headquarters felt dark, even with all the lights on and monitors glowing. It might have had to do with the weather outside and the late hour, and it might have had to do with the fact that I was bracing myself to deliver hard news. I'd ridden with the others in an effort to stay connected and keep a thumb on the pulse of the group, going from a dark car with only the headlights on the road ahead of us to our headquarters, where the light felt insufficient, left me feeling like I was underwater and the surface was a ways off. The world beyond the headquarters and the car gave me an ominous vibe. So, like, we're setting up the tone. You can feel it like a pressure on your chest, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that Victoria is falling back once again on water imagery, water and darkness, drowning in this lack of light. And I like this because we both have this moment where knowing the truth is a weight on her, but also the knowledge that once the truth is exposed to her team, once she shines a light on the truth, it's going to be bad too. Like it could be, I don't know, blinding. I love that. Like it's dark, it's ominous. Like there's drowning. The weight of this information is drowning on her. There's not enough light, but still shining a light on it, bringing the truth, exposing it, bringing the stuff to the surface is terrifying too.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that idea of the truth being blindingly bright. It's too bright to look at. Damages you.
Yeah.
So Sveta, Victoria, and Rain discuss the idea that Sveta might be consistently holding back in order to not break her suit, something that she doesn't even seem to be aware of.
Yeah, I really love how the dialogue sets this out here. Like this, you're used to holding back. I could see the realization cross her face, the connecting of two dots. I could relate to it. I could relate it to a lot of moments where I'd missed something that seemed objectively obvious. We weren't always obvious. That's true, she finally said. This realization that Sveta is in this, like, lives in this constant state of holding back. Like, holding back has become so much of the norm that she seems not even consciously aware that she's doing it all the time, right? Like, and it has become like that. It's become that way, and she, like, this realization to her is a big deal, I think. And I wonder again, when I see like characters like this talk about, you know, physical limitations and their physical problems, I always want to relate this to the stuff that's going on in their heads, right? And I wonder if in her mind she thinks this extends just beyond just the physical, whether she's holding back in her emotional relationships, she's holding back with she's holding back with her friendships. Like, is she in a perpetual state of holding back in every single kind of way because she has to survive, and what that realization will change in her head, you know? I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but
no, I love that. I think that is being set up. Honestly, I think, you know, we have. I was thinking today actually about the fact that the beginning of the last arc was Sveta and her, you know, I don't know where to draw the line sometimes. Yeah. And you and I were like, oh, so obviously this is going to be the Sveta arc where Sveta gets her interlude. And we were completely wrong.
Yeah.
And now we're in the position where she's the only breakthrough character who hasn't had an interlude, unless I'm wrong.
You're not.
I don't think I am. Including Natalie. And we're getting these hints of things like she doesn't know where to draw the line. She doesn't know what her limitations are. And we have pointed out before, that's both physical and psychological.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're overreaching at all.
Yeah, but I mean, that is a fundamental realization in yourself, you know? Like, and I can't wait to see how this plays out. I really like this. And I really like that we're doing all of this, like, in the shadow of the truth that's about to come out, right? Like, this is the focus of this chapter is the Chris reveal, but we still are dealing with the ongoing Sveta arc.
Right. So before delivering this news, Victoria armors herself in makeup and clothing. We get this paragraph as she's thinking back about kind of her reasoning and history of why she puts on, you know, why she spends so much energy on her appearance. And the paragraph goes, there was another side to the nostalgia, darker. After being turned from wretch to a Victoria made of stray animals, of rats and dogs, I'd stumbled through the days. My skin hadn't felt like my own, and it hadn't really been my own. The layers I put on over my skin were in my control, and even the most basic of makeup could be the outer layer that worked with the inner turmoil and found reconciliation with the skin and meat between.
I love Victoria so much, man. I love, like, the paragraph you just read, the few paragraphs that came before it. Makeup and clothing as an armor, like, and how the thing I love about it is this is something she's been doing. She goes back to nostalgia and remembers that she was doing this in her Glory Girl times, that she was putting on makeup late at night, even though she knew she was going to have to take it off in a couple hours, that she was covering up injuries to make her seem like invulnerable still. And now, like, after the wretch situation, she's still using clothing and makeup as armor, but, like, the reasoning behind it has switched. Like, it's and I just love how this same, you know, coping mechanism can extend through different kinds of trauma, and it's so wonderful. It's so complex. Like, it just you see paragraphs like these and you're like, the complexity of what Victoria is dealing with as a character is like so nuanced and difficult, and like you can kind of, like, you can look at some characters and you can kind of see their arc before they get there, right? Like, you can see, okay, here's their want, here's their need, and here's what they need to do in order to get those things to align and become a better person. But her issues are so complicated and so complex. There's no clear trajectory for me here in her arc. Like, there's no clear way you can say, this is exactly how this is going to go. And I love that. I love the mystery of that. I love not being sure about where she's going to go as a character.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great. I agree completely. Like, there are too many different facets of her, which makes her a beautifully well-rounded and realistic character that you really relate to. And I mean, it feels more realistic too, right? Because humans are that way. Like we're a big bag of stuff. So, you know, we could I could talk about this part forever, but like this part where she's getting dressed, putting on makeup, she's reflecting on the outside pressures that have consistently made her feel like she has to put in a lot of effort, from relatives, from peers, and even from Dean. And I want to pull that out specifically because this thought of this time that Dean made a comment and she blew up at him. This is really interesting because it's like the first negative, possibly kind of like humanizing recollection of Dean that she's had in this whole story. She's taking him off the pedestal a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled you pointed that out because it immediately jumped out to me too. Dean has absolutely been on a pedestal throughout this story. We've talked about this before about how her memories of Dean might not even be like specific longing for him, but rather longing for a time in her life where she felt like everything was relatively good, and she sees the death of Dean as kind of one of the first moments in a spiral that led to everything bad that happened to her. So an admission here that Dean is not this perfect guy, that he did some stuff wrong, that he pissed her off, and sometimes is important, and it's a change. And I love that it's an abstract memory, right? Like she says she doesn't even remember specifically the thing that he said that set her off. She just remembers that it happened. And up until this point, I think the Dean memories have been pretty specific. Like she's been specifically remembering certain things, like sitting at night, you know, nerding out about Cape stuff. She very specifically remembers the moment she learned of his death. And realized she couldn't stop that from happening. This is so much more like, I don't remember the specifics of it, but I just remember being mad for a while, and it took me a while to forgive him. And I love the difference in that. Like this feels like a much more natural memory to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like this isn't part of her. What's the word? I don't know how you pronounce it. Like hagiography, that her narrative about how awesome Dean is and how like it was almost like a retcon love story almost. This is just like, oh yeah, I remember that one time that Dean said something rude to me and I was pissed at him. Like, yeah, very like natural, normal, like sort of almost catching her off guard. And it's kind of a negative, again, it's kind of a negative memory, which like normally he's memories of him are like a solace. This is more like, yeah, Dean was a part of this whole thing too.
Yeah, and maybe this is a representation of her kind of learning to deal with that stuff a little bit, and taking someone down from a pedestal is part of getting over someone, right? Like when you, I mean, I'm reflecting this to being dumped because that's my experience. I've never dated someone that's died, fortunately, but when you've lost someone or when you've lost a relationship, you tend to focus on only the good things and you're missing them, and you want that if you could just get that back. And then part of moving beyond a person that you've lost is recognizing that it wasn't all the good things. There were bad things too. And
yeah, and I should spell out like probably a big reason why I kind of like made the connection the way I did is that she's basically just kind of been asked out. And
yeah, that's true.
Maybe like in the background, her brain is rearranging things so that that's okay.
Sure. Which is not to say she's like ready to go to be romantically involved with anyone. I think she's got a lot to work on before she should put herself in that position. But yeah, I mean, this is a change, and it's worth pointing out for sure.
Yeah. So the injured half of Breakthrough arrives in a taxi. And Victoria immediately singles out the team members that she expects to be able to take the news the best, the most level-headedly. There's some heartwarming family-feeling interactions as these friends come back in from the rain. We see that Kinsey has feathers in her hair and no hairpan, and she seems happy.
Yeah, but I mean, in this case, we know that these family-friendly reactions are just serving a purpose of like setting us up to be heartbroken. Like, I mean, like this, like Kenzie coming in here and being happy and pointing out the feathers and pointing out that she's not wearing her pin, so that presumably she's not hiding the scar on her face. That is specifically to twist the knife. Like, so we see, oh, look how good she's doing. Look how good everything is. This is all going to come crashing down on our character soon. And it's no accident that this is being pointed out to us through someone's point of view, because Victoria is seeing all this too, and knowing that she has to destroy this idyllic scene. And so the book is really emphasizing how wonderful and happy everyone is, and we're all, everyone's back together and we're all doing good, and here's bad news bears time.
Yeah. The reading experience for me the first time was really interesting, because like there's the element of like, oh, this is all so great, but like that is actually present, but then like in parallel to it is the dread,
right,
of like this is being set up so that it can all be really painful when she tells them the news. Like,
yeah.
But it was interesting to me because it wasn't just the dread. Like I genuinely felt like, oh, breakthrough, everyone's happy and everyone likes each other. That's great.
Well, that's the weird thing about your emotions, right? Like you can know all the bad stuff is coming and still take joy in these moments of team cohesion and an idyllic world that has to be destroyed. If anything, it makes you appreciate them more because you know that this is not permanent, that it's not going to last.
Yeah, that's true. I like that. So Victoria begins to think about her concept of spine, which is an acronym from Uncle Neil. And this is schedule, make sure there's a healthy window of time set aside for discussion. Perception, make sure everyone is on the same page in the right frame of mind. Invitation, ask if they want information. Necessary, get to the meat of things quickly, be blunt. And then empathize, meaning leave room for people to process.
So I love this technique. I think it's great. I think it's smart. It's also so fucking hilariously Victoria that I couldn't help but laugh at it. Like, it's just like, okay, we got this really hard thing to do. What's the nerdiest way I could come up with dealing with this? Use this acronym. Like, I love it. Like, I absolutely love it. I'm not making fun of her, but it's so Victoria. It's so absolutely 100% Victoria.
Yeah, right. And it's like, she feels like if she sticks to her checklists, her black and white, or black text on white paper, it's going to be something she can handle, right?
Yep.
That's been her all along.
Yeah, that's what she goes back to for strength every time she needs it, is if I can go back to here's what you're supposed to do, here's this, then this, then this, then this, then I can deal with this. And that's exactly what she does.
Yeah. So she takes those people off, and we get this passage. We still walked, but they were quiet, all of them watching me. Ashley had a reddish tint to her nose and cheekbones. Her only headwear was a pair of earmuffs. Tristan was better bundled up, while Natalie was the best prepared, wearing her puffy jacket that was primarily for function. So I like this because, first of all, it's an utterly savage drive-by fashionisting of Natalie's outfit, but also it's reminding us who is here and who is not here. And like, that seems like a silly thing to point out perhaps, but like, it's important that we know that Tristan, Natalie, and Ashley have been invited, and that Rain, Sveta, and Kenzie haven't, because like that really matters to the dynamics of this scene and the following scenes. Like, yeah, it's always good to have an accurate picture of the scene. The writer doesn't always need to remind you who is in the scene because it's not always critical. But in cases like this, it's critical. It's unusually important to know exactly who's present to understand like the evolution of what is impacting who when.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And this is something that's hard to know when to do, right? Because I think like when you're sitting down to write a scene, it's all in your head. And so you might think the geography of the scene and the people in the scene are clear because that scene's in your head. But the people reading that can't read your mind might not. So knowing when you have to explicitly point stuff out like this is really important. And I think this is absolutely a place where it needed to be done, because we needed to specifically know, because it matters who she pulled off first. That says something about how she views these people, and it matters, who she didn't. And you're right. I mean, it's great. And then, yeah. I mean, of course, within this, we have more wonderful moments of levity they're just going to be crushed. Like we have like even Natalie, like even they're like having fun and poking at Natalie and her relationship, her time with her boy. Like it's this wonderful idyllic moment. Like I loved the like Victoria, help me, and like joking about like sending him to the wolves and wolves in sheep's clothing, and he's like, no, it's goat clothing, and it's like so hilarious and wonderful. And here we go, we got to destroy it all. Let's do it.
Yep, and she just kind of cuts into this, and she starts in her little thing, her spine, and I mean, like one of the like the first bits of this that's particularly gutting to me is, and it's not just gutting, but it's such good writing as you can imagine exactly how it should be delivered. You know, it's Tristan's. It's he's 13. Tristan stated, voice firm, like he could say it with enough authority to make it so. Then, in a 180 in every respect, he said, he's not 13.
Yeah. I like how there's not even a question mark there, right? Like, it's not like he's not 13. It's a 180 in every respect is just a wonderful line to get across exactly what you wanted. And it's bolstered by the explicit, descriptions of his voice beforehand. Voice firm, like he could say it with enough authority to make it so. I love that, and I love that then we say a 180 in every respect. It's so good. Love it.
So she finally tells them that he was Lab Rat. Yeah, and it's obvious like that nobody needs to be reminded who Lab Rat is in this setting. It's a name that carries as much baggage as like Siberian, in the sense that people in this world immediately know how bad it is.
Yeah, which I think is another thing that's important to declare in the story, though. One of the things that's so unique about this type of storytelling is that the interludes always kind of naturally give us a leg up on most of our characters. We always kind of know things that they don't, but the text still needs to explicitly declare what the characters know. So by having this reaction, like Natalie says, "Oh no," immediately, and so we get a very clear understanding of what the general knowledge of Lab Rat as a villain in this world is. I don't think we had a clear picture of that before this moment.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. In fact, I think we had the opposite of a clear picture, because we were recently just like talking about how like, yeah, well, maybe Lab Rat wasn't that bad of a guy.
Bad call, Matt. Bad call.
Yeah. So Tristan is immediately angry, so angry, in fact, that he asks to be shunted away. Byron then comes out, and then his reaction is to just look at the ground as he walks. Ashley's reaction is that she seems like bitter. Like she's not the hot, ranting Ashley. She's not the cold, murderous Ashley. She's someone who feels hurt and betrayed by someone that maybe she trusted.
Yeah. So I think we're going to talk about this more as we see more of everyone's reactions when the team is as a whole. But were you surprised by either of their reactions here? Tristan gets so angry that he immediately needs to go away. Ashley's level of disappointment is visible, but like different from how she normally reacts. Let's phrase it this way. If I had asked you, 2 weeks ago, how is Tristan going to react to this news? How is Ashley going to react to this news? Would you have gotten it right?
But I don't think so, because like Tristan, I thought that he already disliked Chris, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So like, why would he be so upset about a betrayal by somebody he already kind of like didn't like too much? And then Ashley, I imagine that she would go one of her two typical paths of either ranting, nostrils flaring and being furious, or like going like super cold. But this isn't really the kind of cold that I associate with Ashley. It's more of just like it's just a very human reaction, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of what Ashley's thought process throughout all this is, oh no, Kenzie, right? So and that's most of her reaction here seems to be focused on, this is going to be bad for Kenzie and I need to do something about that, for sure. But there is a little bit we see here where they're talking about the complexity of Chris's situation, of Lab Rat's situation, and Ashley pipes in and says, everyone's supposed to get a second chance. And Victoria says, yeah, I agree. But if it was offered and he didn't take it, if he decided to hide and operate in secret, does he really get that benefit? I say it depends, Byron said, barely audible. Yeah, I said. And that's like, I think a little hit of where Ashley's mind is, because I think Ashley probably relates on some level to the idea of wanting to hide your identity because you're going to be prejudged for things that you didn't necessarily do. So I think Ashley's probably going to be very observant to how the rest of the team reacts to the knowledge that Chris is this terrible person from before, and how they're going to judge him or prejudge him for that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that Ashley's probably doing right now is like recontextualizing in her memory all these conversations she had with Chris.
Yeah.
Where, like, you know, he probably did share things with her, but they were probably like manipulated to hide information. But
Sure.
She's smart enough that she can kind of put together what was he probably actually getting at there.
Yeah.
Because like the dream stuff. I mean, we know that he probably talked to her about the dream stuff. So
yeah.
So now that Wildbow has delivered the straight jab to the nose, he winds up for the right hook to the nutsack. And Victoria and the others return to the HQ warm and happy. Or sorry, they're not warm and happy. They return to the warm and happy milieu that they're now going to completely destroy.
Yeah. And before we go back to that, though, I just wanted to touch on one thing, because this segmented team conversation ends with this one line before we have a section break that says, "The Chris we knew was gone." And here's the thing about this is, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, that's both true and not true. Because, like, yes, Chris lied about a whole bunch of stuff, but we also know that a little bit of who he is as a person came through in his conversations with these guys. Like, we know that while he was continually dishonest to his team, part of him probably bonded with them and shared real feelings he had, even if like the scenario around those feelings was false. So we're again working with knowledge based on being inside Chris's head, knowledge that none of these characters have access to. And it's very interesting seeing them, you know, jump to the understandable conclusion that everything he told us was wrong, that Chris was a complete lie. They never really existed. They're completely gone, and we're never going to get them back. When we know it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And I think maybe, like, individually they all have a different piece of the puzzle that, when put together, gives the impression that Chris is what we talked about last episode, like not lab rat, but also not lab rat, right? Like
right.
It's complicated.
Not yeah. Lab rat.
Right. So before they can destroy Kenzie's soul, she has some good news for them. She's been engaged in side dealing with Chicken Little and has all kinds of complicated, morally gray compromises to offer the team.
Hooray! The thing that I love about Victoria in this moment is that she, like, knows what she's about to do, and she almost, like, can't even be bothered to deal with this information, right? Like, she's got bigger things to worry about than Kenzie just inadvertently signing up them for whatever's going to happen here. It's great that we get to see the consequences of this whole thing, like, almost immediately after we move past this Chris stuff. That's the main focus of the next chapter. But first we've got this situation to deal with. So we'll deal with that whole mess in a minute. Yep.
So, like, one very interesting element here is that these are the more volatile team members that we're now talking to, like, and specifically Kenzie and Sveta, in terms of how they specifically are going to feel about this. And Victoria now can't actually use her spine technique because the other team members, mainly Tristan, are too raw and upset about it to be sensitive. So, like, you're even more on edge about how this is going to go down because it's Sveta and Kenzie now. And Sveta and Kenzie are, like, already arguing about Chris before we even leave the P in spine. And then Tristan just blurts out, he lied about everything, before she can even get, like, through I to N. So we basically, like, skip I. And it's just, this is the context where she would have loved to have her black letters on white text to rely on. And it just, I can't even put the fault at her feet, but it just didn't go right. And it's painful.
Yeah. I mean, by the end of this entire interaction, she's going to say, I messed this whole thing up. And I mean, I'm not really interested in like actually pointing fingers and saying, yes, you messed this whole thing up. But it is absolutely true that this did not go the way she wanted it to. And some of her strategic maneuvering around here kind of backfired. I think she was really expecting Tristan to be a more rock person in this whole thing, that he was going to kind of be there to support her in the breaking of this news. And his reaction was a lot more, angry, red-headed Tristan than she expected. And that kind of ruined some of her stuff. I also think like the decision to tell Sveta not last, but in the second group, like makes sense when you understand the full nature of Lab Rat. But Sveta being aware that she was chosen in a second group for something also makes her more agitated. Like it triggers her feelings of betrayal. And I think by the end of this whole thing, Sveta's like understanding, but in the moment that kind of like raises her hackles, and like she gets more defensive, and it just like things don't go well. Like this was never going to go well. Like we have to state that this was always going to be a disaster, but I think it goes just about as bad as it could have, all things considered.
Right. I mean, like there's a reason Victoria didn't bring it up for 3 days, which is
Right.
that like she just knew it was unavoidably going to be really painful.
Yeah.
So it's funny because, we just talked about how like we learned a lot from the fact that everyone knew who Lab Rat was by name. We also learned, a little bit by learning that Rain isn't familiar with Lab Rat because he lived in the boonies his whole life. And this is perfect because it gives the other characters the opportunity to explain like what is the common level of knowledge about Lab Rat in the world.
Yeah. And that's great because like you said, what we know of Lab Rat was bad guy in Birdcage, then escaped Birdcage and helped out with things. And then we learned a little bit more about him last week or 2 weeks ago rather. And we see that, maybe there were some good parts of him. We were like, hey, let's be positive about this. But now we have to level set and remind people or tell us for the first time, here's the extent of the things that Lab Rat did. And we get some very explicit stories about just how awful this guy actually was when he was in full operation. For every one person who went to the asylum for one reason or another, there was a Lab Rat victim. So 1 to 1, every one person that went for another thing, a person was there because of Lab Rat. And then we learn a little bit later about this thing that he was doing in the screaming anxiety form. He did that to someone. There was a woman like that. Her mind didn't exit that state, and she roared out cuss words nonstop all day, every day, without sleeping. So yeah, we're really trying to get across to the reader, the extent of actually how terrible and awful and evil this guy was. And not to say that's all he is, and he does deserve a second chance on some level, just like everyone else does, and could get better. And again, this is not Lab Rat. This is something different, but it's important information to have for sure.
Yeah. I mean, like we're learning kind of how to feel about this through Sveta, I think, because Sveta is devastated to hear who Chris was.
Yeah.
And like, because like Lab Rat is basically like a one-man cauldron, but like kind of worse.
Yeah. At least Cauldron had some kind of weird moral justification for it. Like he's just doing it because he wants to. Right.
Precisely. Like, yeah. Cauldron at least has an ethical framework, and they're not just like, well, I need to,
we need to make a lady scream for a long time.
Yeah, right.
For science.
Yeah. And then Kenzie keeps smiling and giggling, which is like the worst possible reaction.
Yeah, it's awful.
And she doesn't like seem to want to give any ground. Like she keeps defending Chris, even defending Lab Rat specifically.
Yeah, and that's where she's really pushing against the line, right? She's like, no, maybe he had a good reason to torture all these people. And that's like directly triggering both Sveta and Victoria. And here's where the one thing where I think Victoria's planning went really well. I think telling Ashley ahead of time was a really smart decision, because that way Ashley can be emotionally prepared to get next to Kenzie and to help her and to push her in the ways that she knows how to do very well. Because Ashley does a really great job of stopping Kenzie when she starts going down a certain line of thinking too far. Like the reason why Kenzie doesn't finish the thoughts about, justifying the monsters Chris turned people into is because Ashley stops her. And that was very smart. Telling Ashley was very, very smart, because I don't think if she was learning this at the same time, she could still probably like go to Kenzie and attempt to help out. But I think allowing her to process it on her own first before she had to be dealing solely with Kenzie, very important.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's perfectly astute of her, actually. And
yeah.
I mean, I think this probably could have gone worse, actually. But that was a good move. So I just like this exchange where I think Victoria says, I hear what you're saying, but we can't extend the benefit of the doubt. Not about this. Not until we have a reason to. If we have a reason, if we have to have a reason, it's not the benefit of the doubt, Kenzie replied. And then like a little bit later, it doesn't matter any to me, Kenzie said, stubborn. It doesn't change anything. In fact, I kind of feel validated, because it fits everything in super neat with my seating chart. So like but I love this idea of if we have to have a reason, it's not the benefit of the doubt, because this ties in so well with so many of the things we've been talking about in context of of like, what is a second chance? I don't remember the exact which one of the discussion questions it was, but it was like something about like, what is the nature of a second chance and what does it mean to have a second chance? And it's like, yeah, like if I mean, I couldn't have worded it better myself. Like if you have to have a justification, then you're not actually giving a second chance. You're making someone prove that they deserve some kind of concession,
right?
Which is a different thing entirely.
Right. Everyone gets a second chance universally, but you have to prove that you're worthy of it first. It's like, well, wait a minute, hold on. That's not. Yeah, I mean, I love. The thing I love about it is you're right. She is technically correct here, and I think Kenzie is obviously letting her love of Chris, blind her a little bit, and do the same thing she does with all the other people she kind of gets overly obsessed with, that she's able to look past all the things that they do to her, or look past, common social norms, and defend them no matter what. But she's also correct that if we're going to live in this world where people deserve second chances, like, I can't say it better either. It's not the benefit of the doubt if you have to have a reason for it. Like that's so true. that's what I love about how this all happens, because Kenzie is being like herself, and she's hurting other people while defending Chris. She's hurting Sveta. She's hurting Victoria to a certain extent, but she's also not wrong. And that's why we talked about Chris as kind of this point of, bringing together all the themes that we had been talking about through the book so far. And that's our challenge to our characters who are trying to deal, especially our protagonist, who is trying to deal with what is the nature of a second chance? What is the nature of forgiveness? How do we grow and change? How do we allow people to have the space to do that? And she's obviously not ready to deal with those questions around Amy, and might never be. But here's Chris, who does a similar thing. He turns people into monsters. And what do we owe a person like that? And especially if that person lies to us about it from the get-go.
Right. It's been a long time since we talked about this idea that Breakthrough has this issue of being like not wanting to step on each other's toes, and thus they're kind of always walking on eggshells. And I think the reason why we haven't mentioned it in a while is it hasn't really been an issue in a while. I think they've gotten better at it. But right here, what we're seeing is basically Sveta and Victoria both kind of pulling a "don't go there" card on Kenzie when like Kenzie is, like you said, not actually saying anything wrong, and in fact she's saying things that Victoria might agree with in a different frame of mind or a different context. Like I thought the whole point of this group was that we're all monsters, aren't we? And we're all supposed to be willing to to be open to the idea that even though we're all monsters in different ways, we can all come back from that. And
Yeah.
it's more complicated here because Chris did lie to them to the extent that it's like you could say that his membership in the group was manipulative and in bad faith. I don't know if that's entirely true either, and neither does Breakthrough at this point.
Yeah.
I understand their feelings of betrayal, like absolutely.
Sure.
But again, like I guess I'm just pointing out how interesting it is, this dynamic, this reaction between Kenzie, who is almost just like holding to the party line of the group, but then she's being shut down by Victoria and Sveta and kind of successfully shut down too, because Ashley's like, "Yep, we're going outside."
Yeah. I mean, I will say that someone saying maybe he had a reason to turn a woman into a screaming monster that never stopped screaming is probably not a thing that you want to say to two people that have been turned into monsters by other people, generally. But I mean, I agree with you that, and doesn't the fact that some of the people are reacting so negatively, specifically to finding out that he was lab rat, like prove his point about hiding that he was lab rat? Like, I mean, not entirely, because again, part of what they're feeling is betrayal at the lie, but Sveta specifically is less concerned to me about the dishonesty and more concerned about that he was the mini cauldron turning people into monsters, and that's despicable, and I was next to this person. And so, I mean, I think it not entirely proves his reason, like proves him correct for deciding to make that choice, but it doesn't help with the counter argument that no, people would have given you the benefit of the doubt either.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense to me. Like, yeah, if he had told them on day one, yeah, I have a lab rat clone, it would have been, yeah. Right. Who knows though, really? Yeah. So we've talked about everybody now except Rain, actually. So on hearing Chris's, but like specifically, Rain doesn't react too much because he doesn't know who lab rat is. But then on hearing the specific detail that Chris's transformations weren't aimed at like repairing himself, but rather at making himself more monstrous, Rain flips the table, and Ashley takes the like uncontrollably giggling Kenzie out for a walk. Tristan gives Rain a hug, and Sveta is just kind of left alone with her anger.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but what I love about this so much is that each individual member has their own individual reactions to the news, right? And they have their own individual issues and their own things that upset them for their own character-driven reasons. Like we said, you could have just made this homogenized anger, but they didn't. We have Tristan. Like Tristan's entire focus throughout this whole thing, it's something he repeats again and again, is he lied about everything. He lied to me. That the part that really seems to upset him the most is the dishonesty. That it's not like we don't see Tristan specifically say he's lab rat. That's disgusting. It's all he lied to us about everything.
Yeah, right. Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Because that's the first thing he blurts out. He doesn't blurt out he's lab rat. He blurts out he lied to us.
Yeah. And
exactly.
Rain, I think Rain focuses on that too, on that dishonesty, on that he was lied to, but in a different kind of way. Like he says, Chris was my friend, like my first friend. That like he's shunned by everyone in the Fallen. He decides he wants to get away from them. Maybe is trying to change and trying to be a better person. And here he finds this guy who is kind to him and lets him borrow things, and this real friend that's not trying to manipulate or use him. And he finds out that this person, in trying to escape from the monstrosity of the Fallen, he befriends this person who he learns is actively trying to become more monstrous. And you got to wonder, like, if he's feeling in his head, like, what is wrong with me that I can't escape from being allied with these monstrous people, right? And I think that's why we see the table flip come at that one moment when we learned, no, he was actually trying to transform into the monster. He was trying to be less Chris and more monster. And that's like everything Rain was trying to escape from.
Yeah, I love that. I don't think I made that connection, but I love that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then like as we go through them, like I said, Ashley's reaction is pretty focused on Kenzie, on getting Kenzie through this stuff. We don't get to see a lot of her individual response to this. We get hints and pieces of it, but not totally. Sveta's entirely focused on the lab rat side. Like, it doesn't seem like the I mean, it is betrayal, so that activates her betrayal, trigger, but also the fact that it's specifically lab rat is what's most important to her. And that's like, everyone has their own reaction to their own part of it that's character driven, and they all make sense within their character. Like, this is so complex and complicated, and I just love how it all plays out. I really, really love it.
Yeah, right. It's like I said at the top of this chapter, like, not a possible potential beat of emotional devastation is missed here.
Yeah. And I mean, Kenzie being carried away because she's laughing uncontrollably is like the cherry on the top of this shit sundae, because it is just like this, like you can almost hear it as you're reading it, right? Like this is the worst thing that's happened, and there's this uncontrollable giggling cutting through it all. And I like, Rain says to her, like, stop. And she's like, I can't. And it's so devastating.
Yeah. Man. So, yep. As this chapter wraps up, Victoria looks away from the scene, aiming to compose herself, and she finds herself looking at the projections of Tattletale's terrifying notes.
Yeah. That was bad. Let me make myself feel better by reading about all the ways the world is going to end.
Yeah. Yep.
And of course, this chapter ends with the most ominous beat of it all, right? Like, her saying, man, it would be really dangerous if this info got out, basically guaranteeing that that's going to happen.
Yep. So we move on into our Christmas present, Scott.
Yay!
11.3 Christmas Day chapter. And this chapter picks up with Vicky and Ashley bringing Kenzie to their apartment to keep an eye on her. Kenzie's having a bit of a freak out. I'm actually not sure if the freak out that they're reacting to is the freak out that we saw, or if she like is implied to have said or done more things after the cut, so to speak. But in either case, they're taking care of her. They're going to reassure her. They're reassuring her actually that she's handling it better than she thinks she is.
Yeah, I think we saw everything that she said, probably, with the exception of like more giggling and because I think the focus of how she feels is related to like she's acting like she used to act, and that was very much to me connected to the smiling to hide the way you're feeling, the laughing to hide the way you're feeling, and that kind of thing. So I think that tracks for me.
Yeah.
But I really love that this chapter opens on Victoria carrying Kenzie, and we get these beats about how, she's so skinny, but because she's wearing this big puffy clothing, it means carrying her requires more of her arms than it normally would. We get moments here where she says like it's hurting her former injuries, it's hurting her gunshot wound, it's hurting her burns, and it's like I think there's a lot of symbolism here that like she's carrying Kenzie and it's causing her pain, because this is a heavy burden to carry. What's going on with Kenzie right now is heavy and complicated, and it is like not an easy thing to do for any of these characters.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love this beat where Ashley reacts to seeing Slashley being terrifying, but probably doesn't notice that Slashley has gotten out teas for the little girl to drink.
You mean Natalie, right? Natalie saying. You said
Natalie.
You said Ashley to Slashley. Just want to make sure.
Natalie sees Slashley being terrifying.
Yes.
But Slashley is getting out teas for the little girls to drink.
Yeah. I think we're doing a lot with damsel in this chapter, and there's a little bit of her in the next one that we'll have to get into next week. But I do think it is very meaningful that Natalie seeming to only focus on the scary parts of her and miss the human parts of her is like doing something here for sure. Like, we've called Natalie our general humanity surrogate before, that she's a great surrogate for how non-capes are going to react to certain things. And obviously she's much more than that. She's a member of this team now, and she's a complicated character in her own right. But I think her being that humanity surrogate works here because she looks at Slashley and she doesn't see the bedhead. She doesn't see the fact that like all the humanizing aspects of her, the bedhead, the kindness for letting out the tea, all that stuff is missed by her. The things she does see are the claws. She can't look past the monstrous parts to see the human parts. And I think that's really important because I think that's something that Damsel is going to be struggling with her entire life. Like no matter what choices she makes going into the future, people are going to see the monster before any other part.
Yeah, I thought it was fun writing just because like you see in your head, or at least I saw in my head, like the image of Damsel like in the doorway with her long knife claws, like silhouetted, just like a black silhouette in light. Yeah. And then like shifted when Victoria's like, what I see is the kind of like sillier version of my friend who is ridiculous and just woke up from a nap because she naps all the time. And yeah, like it's fun. It's fun that your brain renders both things for you.
Yeah. I mean, you could also make the argument that, you know, Victoria sees Natalie's reaction to the claws and just like, because we don't know that Natalie didn't see these things, that she didn't see the tea, that she didn't see the bedhead. We know that Victoria thinks that Natalie didn't see this stuff. And this might be going down a rabbit hole we don't really need to go down, but it could also be just a example of how Victoria views certain people unable to see past the monster rather than those people actually being unable to see past the monster. That's a level that I don't know if I want to go down because that gets so complicated, but
yeah, right. I mean, I think it's worthwhile to mention the fact that Victoria's been quite wrong about Natalie before. Like, and maybe that was just like us being wrong, but like I remember when back when Natalie went to like that big Cape gathering and Victoria's like narration is like, capes are neat, Natalie said sarcastically. Or something like that. And it's like, or at least our takeaway was like, oh, Natalie must hate capes. And that like wasn't the case at all, actually. So so I think Victoria was projecting this wrong sense of Natalie, and maybe that's what's happening again here too. So I don't know. I like that you pointed it out.
Could be. Yeah, I think basically what the most important thing is we're doing here is we're setting a view of Damsel as a monster. And I think that's going to matter because, I mean, we move into discussion of Damsel as a restless person that wants to leave and go be a bad guy again, right? So, you know, chaining those two individual scenes together seems to be like we're preparing this trend of Damsel's going to be making decisions in the future, and part of that decision-making process is related to her perception amongst people, like how people view her when they look at her.
Yeah. So speaking of all of that, Victoria eavesdrops on Ashley expressing disappointment with Damsel over her apparent decision to leave. The argument peters out, simply making us aware that Damsel is restless.
So did you see this coming? Like the fact that she was going to leave? I always saw this as a temporary arrangement, right? Like that she was never going to like be part of the group. And I think part of that is the text like makes sure to point out every time we're talking about breakthrough, it's like breakthrough and Damsel. Like they were never like it was never breakthrough Damsel breakthrough member, right? So I kind of always saw this as a temporary arrangement that wasn't going to last. But even so, like, I think it's still sad to see this as an eventuality. I loved the interaction between the two characters. Like, I loved all the interactions we've seen. It's always fun. It's always funny. And we always get to see, like the interaction here specifically is Ashley almost talking to a past version of herself and just being like, no, I've learned things. You're wrong about these things. Why don't you understand that? And being frustrated with what is essentially, like, a version of herself that she's not anymore.
Yeah, that made the wrong choices and is stuck in a past that she's moved on from. And
yeah,
I mean, it's like this specific thing she says where she's like, this thing you call restlessness is like, and we know exactly what she's talking about back from Eclipse. Like,
Yeah.
you can't make your life choices based on that feeling that is a disaster. That's what got us killed in the first place.
Yeah. But for Damsel's credit, she says to that response is, I know what it is and what it becomes. So like, it's not like you can't make your choices on restlessness, true, but to Damsel's credit, if you don't deal with that restlessness in some way, it can blow up in horrible ways as well. And so to not act on it can be just as bad.
Yeah.
And I think that's the complicated nature of this whole relationship between the two of them. Is like, I want to look at this scene and say, from my perspective as a reader, I want to say, look, Ashley has made all the right choices. She's on the road to recovery. She's going to get better. She's going to beat her demons and not be that person that gets so angry she kills people. But I think it's a little more complicated than that. And I think like you want to look at the scene and you want to look at Damsel as the foil that exists to show how much better Ashley is now. But that's a little too easy for this kind of writing, for this kind of story. And I think it's going to be more complicated than that. And I think where Damsel might be leaving the group. She might be, becoming a villain. I think we get hints in the next interlude of where a place that she could slot in very nicely where people would like her. But their conflict, the conflict between the two of them and what that conflict is going to represent in the continuing story of Ashley is going to still matter later in the book for sure.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. This is being kind of slowly played out. Damsel has been kind of a background character for a while now. So.
Yeah. And I wish, I really wish I could say, with 100% certainty that her entire purpose is to show how much better Ashley is now. But I don't have that certainty. That's what I want. I don't think it's what I'm going to get.
Yeah, right. So now Victoria goes and she boots up her computer to look over Tattletale's notes. She looks over some of the other Cape research materials for the names listed in Tattletale's notes. We get a flurry of information and images about the mercenaries and capes that have been lurking in the recent background plots. And then Victoria, after kind of going through all this, helpfully summarizes it for us. And she says, making sense of this, the pharmacist had been allied with Teacher. Teacher was connected to the hyper-religious nuts from Earth Cheat, with some Fallen and Kingdom Come roped into that. They, or Teacher, had hired 6 mercenaries. Contender, the one who had created an arena, Noontide, who had tried to put Sveta and I to sleep, and the Order, a quartet of capes who we hadn't seen yet, with only 2 of them in my pictures here. Attention had been drawn to them only because Tori had claimed to be a victim in the goddess debacle and asked for people to help, had asked for help as a non-threat, and then started hanging out with people who hurt others for money. Yeah, so it's very helpful to have that all connected for us.
Yeah, I mentioned this while I was live tweeting, but I'm going to say it again here. Thank God for this. There's a lot of information, being dumped on us in this chapter, and it's almost to the point where it's overwhelming. And so right when it might, like, we're getting so many new cape names, and like there's so much uncertainty around it. Like, we think these are guys from Earthsea, but we're not totally sure about that. That it wraps up into this kind of confusing ball, and thank God our character comes in here and just summarizes it and straightens it up for us. Especially since Victoria is like going so fast through all this because she's such a cape nerd that she's like excitedly making connections and doing one of the things she loves to do more than anything. And probably like the way you and I read the story without this summary, like if this wasn't here, we probably, because we read it like 3 times, could parse all this together and come up with our own summary and in our own heads make sense of it. But we don't have to do that because it's here. And I think, like, I was thinking about this a lot, and I think this is like a really underestimated skill in this writer's arsenal, and that a lot of good writers have this ability to gauge successfully when you're laying too much information out and you need to summarize it, because like a writer knows everything about their world. They know it all, but they don't know how much everyone else knows. So like, I think in a non-serial type of writing situation, you write your book, you have an editor read it, and the editor says, you need to summarize this information because there's too much in this chapter and it doesn't make sense and you need to summarize it. But Wildbow doesn't have that. All he has is his experience to go off of and his ability to successfully gauge a situation and say, I'm going to have to summarize this because people aren't going to be able to parse through it all themselves. Like that's a skill. Like that's a skill that you have to have, and that comes from experience. That comes from writing chapters, 2 a week for years, and then reading people's responses to those chapters and knowing which parts they got and which parts they didn't, and learning like who your nebulous cloud of reader, what they can get and what they don't get. And like that's another thing that is a little bit different about this whole serial thing, right? Is that it's a different kind of feedback. It's a different kind of skill. And it's just fascinating to see this and go like, yeah, that actually knowing when to do that can't be easy.
Yeah. This set me off on this whole tangent because I'm currently binging Pact, because the Media MD guys are doing Deep Impact. Go check it out.
Plugged it,
and that means we're not gonna do that. So anyway, the point is like in the course of binging a Wildbow serial, like binging, the word sort of almost implies reading fast, and like the propulsiveness of these stories tends to be such that you're reading them as a page turner. You're reading, you're not going back. You're clicking next chapter, you're clicking next chapter, clicking next chapter. And it's especially important that the author be ready and willing to be like, remember this thing? No? Okay, I'm gonna remind you, but in a way where we're not being like, to remind you of this thing. It's woven into the story very organically. And I think what's really great about the way he does it here in this particular case that you've pulled out in this chapter is that like we are reading it really slowly and we still appreciate it to have
Right.
everything kind of woven together for us. If you're binging it, it's doubly necessary to do stuff like this because people are just going to completely blow past it and just be like, whatever. Like I'm sure this will make sense to me eventually. I'm just going to keep reading, right?
Yeah.
And Wildbow wants you to understand it now. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, like I said, the amazing part of that is that he can't ask that question mid-chapter. He can't mid-chapter go, hey, you remember this part? Oh, you don't? Well, let me remind you. Like, he has to know ahead of time that you're going to need the reminder and plan around that. Because if I was reading this chapter 2 years from now, I might look at this section and say, I bet this was added because people weren't getting it. So he went in and edited the chapter to add this. But we know for a fact that that's not true because we read it right after it came out. So it's just like, I just find this continually remarkable. And as I was thinking about it, as I was reading this again, I was like, that's a really undervalued skill. That is one of those things that you don't think about being challenging because you're only seeing the end result of it. But you can, like, you have to know before you even release the chapter in a case like this.
Yeah, I agree. So overall, like to kind of touch back on the actual content of the text.
Oh yeah, the story. We forgot about the story.
there's like a suspicion that at least some of these guys or groups are from Earthsea due to their lack of history in her notes.
Yeah, and so what all this means is we're kind of starting to coalesce all the different threads and threats that we've experienced in the book so far. These people are working with these people and they're trying to do this, and all these things that they've been having against them seem to be coming together under some one thing. And she says, it's teacher. Like, I love I think the texts like want to assign every bad thing to teacher is related to the readers like want to assign every bad thing to teacher. Like, teacher's this person we know is so powerful and he's so sneaky that like whenever something bad happens, a lot of the community is like, I bet teacher's involved in that. And I like that our characters do that same thing. It's like, this has got to be, it's all teacher. And we learn at the end of this chapter that not necessarily, that that he had part of this, but he lost control of some of it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I wonder I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but just the idea that like Victoria doesn't like uncertainty. She likes to make decisions, you know, and for her, a facet in making decisions is being like, it's teacher. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we know he's bad. We know he's bad. If there's this one bad guy and he's responsible for all of it, that all makes sense because he's the one bad guy.
Right. Not to jump to conclusions, but it's definitely this guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Victoria's studies are interrupted by a detonation of Ashley's power. And then we start getting the section breaks. So following the first section break, Victoria shoots downstairs. Ashley says she was grabbed by a man that she's 70% sure was there, and she blew a hole in the window. They contact Rain and learn that Kenzie's projector box back at the HQ is sweating, and Kenzie concludes that somebody must have just dumped water on it.
I love Rain, Matt. I love Rain so much. And I love him in this moment. Like after the emotional mess that was the last chapter, there's so much delightful stuff that goes on in this chapter. Like Victoria texts Rain here and says, "Trouble, we might need help." There was a pause. Rain, "That's not good." Thanks, buddy. Appreciate your input.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, this computer's sweating. I hadn't noticed it until this point.
Yeah, no, it's actually, you're right. It's fun to imagine him being like, "Oh shit," and then like, "I'm gonna fall asleep in 15 minutes or whatever," and not be able to help, and just like freaking out about it.
It's really good.
So then Victoria goes into her room and finds everything saturated with gasoline. Section break.
How is this mysterious person getting through their place without being detected?
Yeah.
What I really love how horrified Victoria is of this, though. All her files, months and months of effort, potentially about to go up in flames. She's devastated, and she's angry, too. And there's this moment here where Kenzie mentions that her feathers have been stolen, too, which is absolutely awful. That's the worst thing that could happen. That's worse than all the files. And in this moment, like, it seems like Victoria, in her rage about her files, like, might end up dismissing Kenzie's concern. Like I remember the first time I read this and she was like Kenzie says, "My feathers, they're important." And Victoria's response is priorities. And you think like in the back of my head is like, oh no, is she going to completely dismiss the importance of the feathers because of her files? And we learn later that no, she's not. Actually, she's going to do the opposite of that. And it's adorable and wonderful. And I love it so much. But in this moment, I was like, oh no, don't be dismissive of Kenzie's thing because of your files.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, we were talking earlier about this idea that like she's more angry about the idea of the files and to an extent Kenzie's feathers than she is about the idea that the building is about to be set on fire.
Right. It's not the building, it's the files.
Yeah.
Files.
And I mean, this is totally in character for her too, because I mean, as much of a hero as she is, she's like Cape Nerd first, hero very close second.
Yeah, I think you're right.
She was a Cape Nerd before she was a hero, after all.
True, very true.
So Victoria prepares to save her computer, and I like this bit where she thinks through the end state, like desirable combat outcome is for each of her family members. She goes through all of them one by one and ends on herself. Her specialty is dealing a lot of damage and measuring out how much.
Yeah, so this is one of those fun moments where I think you're reminded exactly how an individual's powers and their strategy around those powers reflect on their personality. Because I think if you look through her family members and see the way their strategy around their power is, you also see how they handle non-power conflict. Like, for example, Carol, her strategy with her power and dealing with things is to just go right for the jugular and then leave your opponent with no other choice but to submit to what you want. Hey, is that how she handles conflict with her daughter? That's kind of familiar. And I think that's I think that's reflected through all of this, right? Because she says Mark, like he sets up like a perimeter with his concussion grenades and basically forces people to retreat. And that made me think of like his role in the fight between Sveta and Carol with Victoria kind of in the middle, where he's just like, okay, we need to get out of here. Like you need to leave. Like this is like forcing people out of bad situations, like setting up a perimeter and forcing people away. Victoria is like you said, this like damage, lots of damage, but measured and controlled damage. And that's exactly how she deals with situations that she like outside of just power situations. She like look at how she dealt with telling them about Chris. Like, she knew she was going to have to deal this blow to her group, but she wanted to do it in this measured and controlled way. That's her. Like, I just love I've loved this since I started reading these books, that everything to do with the powers ties back to who the person is. Everything. And we see this once again. Their strategy around their powers ties back to who they are as people and how they handle all kinds of conflict, because it's part of their personality. And I will never stop loving that as just like a general concept.
Yeah. I think it's incredibly fun, as you said, to look at her description of the way her family members handle combat and to think about their personalities and how that lines up with it so well. And I just love that you pointed that out. That's great. So next, the man ambushes her in her computer room and the two tussle. Victoria manages to disengage and fly to the ceiling with her computer. And at this point, Imp reveals herself.
After another section break.
Yep.
Maybe this is the time where we can talk about them. This is the right time to talk about these section breaks, because you realize as the chapter is going on that Wildbow is using section breaks to kind of call out and emphasize the moments in which Imp is using her power, and things are happening that our characters don't remember. So we're jumping between scenes, and we emphasize this through a complete break in the text and moving on to another thing. It's this wonderful little touch that, like, we've seen Imp shenanigans before and they've been fun, and this is fun here too. And it's just another little structural touch that takes what is a good scene, and I think to me makes it a great scene once you kind of see what the text is doing with those breaks. I just like it a lot. I don't have anything like particularly insightful to say about that technique other than it's fun.
Yeah.
It's just like it takes a good character and a good idea and makes it better.
Yeah, right. I mean, the section breaks imply more of like lost time, I think.
Yeah.
Like and it can be fun in completely different ways, because like I'm immediately remembering the first chapter where Imp well, not the first chapter where Imp is present, but the chapter where Taylor and the Undersiders are breaking into the PRT HQ, and it's just like suddenly there's someone cackling, there's somebody with an axe, and it's just like there's no section breaks there, but like the weirdness is like what the hell is going on? Who is this person?
Right.
And here it's more like, wait, what just happened? Like not who was that, but like what actually is happening? What just happened? And it's, I don't know. I just think it's a fun tool to play with how Imp's presence might be perceived in different contexts.
Yeah.
And it's just, like you said, it's fun.
It's clever. Fun. It's really clever too. And it's like, and like you said, I think the section break in this chapter is used in every way that you can use it. You say, okay, I'm going to do this thing where every time Imp uses her power, there's going to be a section break. What different forms of entertainment can I get out of that? You get like the threatening, scary one. You get the fun one. Like there's the moment where there's a section break and Victoria says to herself, was it over? Had I won? And that's hilarious. Like, that's so funny. She'd like, I guess, I did it. and then like you get the funny part where with her firing the flare gun for a second time because it didn't work the first time. Like it's a clever little structural device in the story that just takes everything and makes it that much better. I just enjoyed it so much.
Yep.
And what I like about the fight in general is at certain points of it, you're kind of unsure if Imp is going to like actually go far enough to kill someone. Like right. Imp has been this kind of changing character who started out like pretty ruthless, and then we kind of saw her like through her interactions with Taylor and other people like learned to maybe not go quite for the nuclear option yet, but you're like, we've been away from her for a while, so we're not totally sure about that. And on the other side, like Victoria is really pissed off because of the files, Matt, the files. So like in the back of my mind, I was like, is she gonna like lose it a little bit here? Because like in her mind, she's like, I could just win this right now. Like, and she could like just take the wretch out and just like win.
Yeah. Right.
But she doesn't, of course. But like in the back of your head, like either of them, you're like, are either of these people going to push it too far?
Right. Yeah. I mean, like we see Victoria get. I'm only like half joking about how angry she gets about the idea that her notes are going to get destroyed. Like she cannot overstate in her own thoughts how serious this is for her.
Yeah, I mean, at one point she's basically like screaming in her head, mine, and you ruined it. Like it's like she's not in a good place about the potential of losing all of this stuff.
Yeah.
My notes were everything, she says.
Yeah.
My notes were everything.
Right. Yeah. So eventually she notices Imp's replaced arm, which we already knew about, but now we're able to look back over the chapter and consider how its presence influenced everyone's perceptions and also kind of limited Imp's power in many cases.
Yeah. I guess it's like the only reason she got caught at all, right, is because of the arm. Like if this were Imp at her full power, she could have just snuck in here and no one would ever noticed and destroyed it all and gotten away with it if it wasn't for that meddling hairy arm. Can we I want to use this moment, and I know we're already running long, but hey, it's us. But I want to use this to kind of talk about like quote unquote contrivances and narrative and how I think this story successfully avoids that kind of critique all the damn time. Because like you could make an argument if you wanted to that the whole Imp getting her arm switched out thing was just a contrivance to make this whole scene possible, right? That because like we said, without the arm, this scene wouldn't have worked that way, because it would be like, well, why is Imp just unable to be completely detectable and just win right away, right? So you could argue that the arm switch was a long form setup just to make this particular scene work. But I think like I just don't think that like you could make the argument that event was a contrived situation just to get here, because first of all, it was set up so long ago, and second of all, it just seems like it's just a natural. Things don't feel contrived when they make sense within the moment of the setup and not just as something that's wanting to pay off for later.
Yeah, I mean, like specifically there, it's like March knows exactly how much of a threat Imp is, and so one of her priorities is going to be to either take her out or reduce her effectiveness. So like it makes sense in that context. It makes sense thematically as like everybody's kind of been hurt. Tattletale's hurt. Tattletale's on her back foot. The whole theme of the story is people recovering from something like damaged about them. So it's totally appropriate that she would have this. So yeah, like I get what you're saying. There's it contrivance to me is when you're like, when you see a story element and you're like, yep, see why you did that, and that feels fake. Like that feels that feels like you just did that so that you could do this other thing later. Yeah.
I do feel like it's generally an overused term in criticism of narrative. Like in general, because like when you get down to it, everything in a book is contrived. Like that's what a story is. The challenge of the writer is to hide as much of those contrivances as possible. And I think when I see stuff like this where you could even try to make that argument, I think about it and I'm like, well, no, this successfully dodges that kind of thing because everything is motivated by character. They react to Imp in a very logical way, and that leads down the road to a weakness that is exploited by the story to make a hilarious and effective action scene that wouldn't have worked without that thing that was set up, but wasn't used just solely for that setup. And it's just like it's good writing. At the end of the day, it's good writing.
Yeah, I like that. I'm glad you brought that up. That was a fun discussion. Mm-hmm. So now the Ashleys arrive, and Imp still gets the drop on them. I just like this exchange between the characters where Victoria's pointing out their name is not Glory Girl anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Imp says, "I don't care. People change names too often. It's better to have one good one that you stick to. Imp was taken, I told her. I don't care. You don't really have it. I don't care." It's just like,
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great
it
because
says so much about these two people.
Right. Well, and it does. I mean, it's like it's such a cape nerd thing for Victoria to say. Like, of course she knows that. Like, she just has that knowledge in her head. No, actually, there's another cape named Imp, and you took it, and you weren't allowed to, because Victoria's talked about that before, about like the complexity of coming up with names that aren't taken, and how that's something that to her actually really matters. Of course, Imp doesn't care at all. And in retrospect, of course, a name like Imp is already taken, right? Like,
Yeah.
like in the world of like, I think of coming up with names for characters in MMOs that haven't been taken before, and something like a 3-letter word like Imp, of course that's going to be immediately taken by someone because it's simple and effective and descriptive. Like, of course someone else came up with that long before Aisha did.
Yeah.
But she doesn't give a shit.
Right. That's her whole character. She wouldn't care about that.
Yeah.
And especially now, like it seems like her concerns are so much more like immediate than like who like I don't know. In Victoria's world, she has to care about PR.
Right.
Imp has been in this Undersider world for several years of like fighting every day for survival, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like it's especially ironic in this. Like, I don't think this matters at all in the world that these characters live in anymore. Like the idea that like you have to pick a unique name. Like, I just don't think it matters, and it's quite adorable that Victoria still holds up. That part of the system is something that remains important to her.
Yeah, I agree. So now Victoria flies Aisha down to ground level out the window, and then hands over her computer and then Aisha mentions that she dated a hero.
Raise anchor, hoist the mainsail, release your ships, everyone. I'm not gonna. That's y'all's. Go for it. Do it.
Yeah.
I won't stop you.
Yeah. Yeah. One change we're not going to be making in 2019 is introducing any kind of shipping section.
Look,
just to be clear,
I think back in the day of a long time ago in 2017, I was probably overly harsh about this whole shipping thing. I don't care. Like, just do it. I just don't want to. Like, I would never tell someone that they're like weird or wrong for doing it, right? And I think I've warmed up to it as like an activity that's very important for a lot of people, and I would never want to tell them that that's wrong. But it's just not something I'm interested in doing.
Well, what's fun here is that Wildbow has created a kind of fiendish trap because now there is a textual ship that exists.
Yep.
But we don't know what it is.
So it's like a ghost ship.
It's like a ghost ship, exactly. And you have to wonder about it.
Yeah, you got to find that ghost ship.
Yeah. I mean, we all want to know, right?
I mean, here, like, honestly, I do kind of want to know. I'm just not going to like sit here and spend hours speculating on it. I assume that the book's going to tell us eventually.
Well,
or maybe it won't.
Either the book's going to tell us, or Wildbow has made sure to not give enough information for us to figure it out, because that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, we're either going to find out or we're never going to find out, and that's the point.
Yeah.
So, as you say, no point discussing it. But I'm still going to discuss it. Anyway.
This is though, Matt, the first time that Victoria specifically states during this conversation, give Kenzie her feathers back, and you're just like fist pump, like fuck yeah, give her the feathers. Those are important.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
Victoria's working on that ship too.
Jesus.
Then Imp fails to fire her flare gun at the target once, forcing her to have to reset Victoria's memory, and then thus proceeds a delightful series of attempts by a half of Breakthrough to play tag with an opponent who they keep forgetting exists. There's the one visual image of Damsel and Swansong barreling out of the darkness on their Annihilation Blast is very cool. And then, of course, the fight ends with Kenzie adorably stepping out in her puffy winter coat and blinding Aisha and everyone else.
Yeah, I love everything about this. Like, it's classic Imp silliness. Like, and I will fire this for the very first time, and it will work. It's
Yeah.
like I think it's cool because we haven't necessarily seen it from this angle before. Like we've seen Imp from her point of view. We've seen her from the point of view of an ally, but we've never seen her from the point of view of people who are trying to not be defeated by her. And I really like it. We also get a moment of Victoria's really ramped up aura that we talked about before, because she's like kind of like trying to boil the frog with her aura on Aisha.
Yeah.
And we get that wonderful moment with Damsel. It's like, how you feeling on this one? It's fine.
It's nothing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all good. And even Kenzie gets a quip at the end where she like, it's kind of a disturbing quip because she says there's nothing left in me but tinkering things. And you're like, oh God.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty badass moment for Kenzie, honestly. It's one of those like backhandedly badass moments where she one-ups like the two prowling, evil-looking, ex-villainesses by just stepping out with her coat on.
Yeah, and her little gun.
Her. Yeah,
right. It's really great.
Her gun looks like a toy.
Yeah.
I believe the text says.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then we get a double section break, which I suppose is indicating that this is not just another imp lacuna. And almost all of the Undersiders are now meeting again with almost all of Breakthrough, or I think all of Breakthrough. Tattletale and Victoria now spar face-to-face over returning the mislaid data, but Breakthrough is pushing back pretty hard.
Before we go on, can I just highlight your use of the word lacuna and how much I love it? It's just,
yes, you may.
You get pat on the back, Matt. Good vocabulary.
Thank you.
You may continue.
Okay. So I'm just going to pull this out, this exchange. And if you refuse to cooperate with us and play ball, then we let your intel leak, including that information about sources, and your allies become your enemies. You're really willing to play hardball? Tattletale asked. Give Kenzie her feathers back. Let the kids talk. You realize what a monster she is, don't you? I glanced back at Kenzie. Nothing resembling a monster, and I'm an expert. And then Tattletale says, I don't know why it didn't copy, but Tattletale follows up saying, right, because you spent 2 years as one. And the reason I pull this out is because Victoria doesn't even react to this jab.
Yeah, which is great. Maybe she's like gotten Tattletale's deal now and is just like, screw you.
Yeah.
Like, no. It's I mean, first of all, just like publicly declaring I'm an expert of monsters because I was one for 2 years is a thing that she's acknowledging in public, which is like a thing like Victoria kind of strays away from acknowledging that time in her life, especially to other people. So being willing to do that there and then not being affected by Tattletale's frankly awful comeback, which is just cruel. Like she could be such a jerk sometimes. Yeah. She really can.
Well, that's what's funny is Victoria's like owning it, and Tattletale's comeback is like a pretty lame comeback by Tattletale standards, because it's like, like Victoria could very well just have been like, yeah, that was the joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, like yep.
And I think it's because she knows she has the upper hand here, right? Like she I think she feels like she's got like I think she's finally recognizing that Tattletale is desperate and against the wall. Like to send Imp out here and do this when Imp is not even at full strength, just like it is desperation. Like these files have leaked. She's going to get in trouble. She's already in a bad situation. And now, Chicken Little inadvertently just made it way worse for them. And it's like, go Imp, you have to go burn this stuff now. We have to do this right now or we're screwed. She knows she's kind of got the head up on her. So like her fuck with you tactics aren't as effective when you know you've got the upper hand in this argument.
Yeah, she's kind of flailing. Yeah.
So, I mean, what do we make of all this, though? So Chicken Little steals this info in an effort to get the two sides to come together. That's his goal. He wants them to cooperate. The Undersiders' response is very on brand for a team that was formerly headed up by Taylor, which is just burn everything down immediately. Breakthrough, realizing they've got Tattletale over a barrel, basically force her and her team to work with them. And so the end result is they end up working together. So mission accomplished.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, I mean, I think the biggest indication that this is kind of to be considered mission accomplished is when Chicken Little gives the tiny little thumbs up to Kenzie, and Kenzie gives a tiny little nod, and then Tattletale gives a huge sigh. which is almost her sigh of like, fine,
right,
you win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like realizing that like this was not like I don't think this was Chicken Little's plan. It's like and then they're gonna overreact and force them to meet together, and then like I don't think that was like I don't think he's that good of a planner, but it got him where he wanted them to go, and it's really wonderful. I mean, I think it's like it's a big deal for Victoria to say that like I want to work with and not work with you, but like I'm willing to share my information with you.
Yeah.
Is a big move for her. I think like there's a desperation on Victoria's side too, and we've been talking about that all episode, that like she's frustrated by the way things are going. She's frustrated by all these situations. She almost just lost everything that she had. All this data was almost lost, and so she's much more willing to work with someone like she just still doesn't like Tattletale. She still probably hates Tattletale a lot, but she recognizes the value she can be, and vice versa, because Victoria's has her files are more complete than Tattletale's.
Right. Isn't that a great moment where Tattletale like respects Victoria's file collection ability?
Yeah.
And then like now this like we as the reader are like, you know what the best thing for Tattletale is up to date, correct information.
Right.
And so like this is a partnership made in heaven. Mm-hmm. So it's fun. It's very, very fun.
Yeah.
So yep, Victoria hands over the files. Her own files. Tattletale realizes that they're up to date. The two team leaders agree that they will let the kids talk to a limited degree, and that the two teams will share information. The two kids share a furtive sign of triumph, which we talked about. And then Tattletale makes a point that one of Victoria's assumptions is off, that it's not teacher, but some other party pulling the strings of these mercenaries. And those people are interested in apparently time loops, stasis, and other fuckery.
Yeah, we get a pretty big hint that the time loop and the stasis they're particularly worried about is very close to home, Brockton Bay related. This could be Dauntless, Matt. There could be some other people, but Dauntless has been this thing that we've set up. We've reminded people about in the story already. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where we were heading with this. But yeah, so it's not teacher. Like, in fact, teacher was so worried about the direction they were going with this that he was like, nah, I don't fuck with that, which is kind of worrying in its own right, where like that's the line where teacher said, no, I'm not going to cross that. This guy.
Right.
So.
The guy who at the end of the last story was like, maybe we could rebuild an entity. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yep. So we're putting the, I don't want to say end game because who knows, but we're beginning to kind of, I think, reveal the cards that are going to be played in the latter parts of the story. You think that's fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. I mean, I think like I don't know. I'm making an assumption that they were referring to Dauntless. I don't actually know about that, but learning how to manipulate the stasis things could be very problematic going into the future. So yeah, I mean, this is going to be a plot element that carries us much further through the story. And the thing that is great about it was, once again, it's something that's been there all along. We've been dealing with the conflict with Earthsea since the very, very beginning of the book. It's just this is a wrinkle in that conflict that we haven't seen before.
Yeah. And I feel like there are going to be some essays written about the thematic implications in this story of time loops and or stasis, whatever it ends up being, the concept of stasis staying the same.
Yeah.
Not recovering, not progressing, time loops, repeating the same thing, repeating the same trauma over and over in a gray boy loop, never being given the opportunity to recover. Relevant to the themes, I would say.
Hey, Matt, I think you are correct. I think that's very astute of you.
Well, thank you. All right, Scott, that was our 3 chapters for this period of time.
Hey, that wasn't too long.
No, it was a fair amount of time.
Still pretty long.
And we're going to save ourselves a little bit of time, and the fact that we haven't figured out what we're going to be doing with discussion questions, and we're just not going to have one today. So instead of that, just talk about, Ward.
Talk about Chris.
Talk Sveta.
How do you think Victoria did with the Chris reveal?
Yeah. There you go.
How'd she handle that?
Do you think she did a good job?
Yeah.
Be sure to be fair to her. All right. That's all we got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over onto our Twitter account at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaly85, and Matt's is actually, weirdly enough, at Harry Manarm.
Yeah. Yep, always has been.
Yeah.
And if you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, Harry Arm, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
And as always, you can find this and all the other shows we do over at our website, www.doofmedia.com. We're back this week. We have all of our shows. We got Book Club on Friday. We got Doofcast Friday morning. We got Vow to View. Everything's back. It's a new year. And we're back in business.
Yep. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our quarterly fan art and costume contests, Q&A sessions, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord chat. Special thanks to new Bidoofs Protean and Michael H. at the $1 level, and Andrew O. at the $5 level, and new Doof Troop member Ruben M. at the $10 level. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you guys. We appreciate it. Even, we took a week off, and some of you still decided to donate to us over that week, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And as always, of course, make sure you head over to Wildbow's Patreon page, patreon.com/wildbow, and donate to him as well. This is his world. We're just playing in it.
And if you can't afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. You can instead help us out by heading on over to Apple Podcasts and leaving one of those sweet, sweet 5-star reviews. None to read this week because, you might get new patrons over a time where you take off. But if you don't do a podcast, you're probably not going to get new reviews. So none to read this week, but keep them coming. We really, really do appreciate them.
Yeah, definitely. That's all for this week. We'll be back next week with 3 new chapters, including Saturday's side piece interlude that we haven't talked about yet.
Man, I love side piece so much. I can't wait to talk about the interlude. I'm so excited.
Me too. Yes.
Feel better.
Well, thank you.
A little nosy nose.
What do you mean?
You're totally healthy.
What?
You did it, though.
We did it. I'm going to click the button.